Hi everybody, I'm Blue Nagoon, and today I'm putting my music fan hat on to talk about some of my favorite vocal retrowave songs that came out in March-ish of 2022. Some of these are from late February. This was just a fantastic month for music. I found a lot of stuff that I really like, and I noticed when I was putting this list together, there's a couple trends amongst the things that I picked. One is that it seems like retrowave is kind of expanding its umbrella to include like the early 90s, which is funny because I've been doing that on an album that I'm working on as well. And secondly, I'm finding myself drawn to music that's really pushing envelopes and is pretty ambitious. You're going to hear that word a lot today. All right, first up is the eponymous EP by Summer Towns, a singer-songwriter-producer from England. This is just really solid synthpop, a la Depeche Mode, maybe minus the guitars. Summertown's voice is good, and I feel like he has a good sense of what he does well, and the songs sort of lean into that, and he brings a nice gravitas to them. The lyrics are good. I really like the synth sound design. There's a lot of very classic era inspired sounds going on. Very clean production. What I especially appreciate is that everything breathes and has a nice sense of space. If I were to pick one track to represent the EP, it would probably be Inside. There's some really nice timed synths in the left ear. All right, next up is another one from late February that I didn't get to till March, and this is Czarina's song, The Fox's Wedding. If you're at all familiar with the retrowave scene, I'm sure you know Czarina. She's a pillar of the community. The whole album that came out in February, Arcana, is definitely worth checking out. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. But this song, The Fox's Wedding, is the one that really tugged at my heartstrings the most. I like that it's a celebration of love and connection, and how when physical and emotional intimacy intersect, things can be pretty transcendent. And it's represented, of course, in the lyrics. You know, for the first half of the song or so, the narrator is just describing their, singing about their feelings. But you get the impression about halfway through the song that the narrator kind of gives up and just gives over to the emotion. And that's when the song really ascends and the string swell happens and there's these big crescendo with drums and vocalizations and it's warm and lush. One thing I really like is that, tied up with all those big emotional feelings, there's always a sense of nervousness or excitement. Even if it's a good nervousness, there's a heightened emotion that happens. And in this song, there's this synth sound. It opens the song and it continues throughout, but it's like kind of panned out. It moves back and forth. It's kind of atonal and stuttery, but it gives the song sort of that nervous edge. And I feel like with that in there, the song really encapsulates the whole experience of connecting with somebody in a significant way. All right, next up is the song Your Surrender by The Golden Hour. This is just a super vibey, gorgeous synthwave with vocals track. The distinguishing characteristic is that it's male vocals, but he's singing the entire song in his high head voice, which he could do. He can definitely pull it off. It gives the song a really plaintive, melancholic feel, kind of timeless. Like it's hard to argue with these emotions when they're delivered in this way. Next up is the song Borealis by Nature of Wires. This song features Madil Hardis on operatic vocals, and forgive me if I'm saying that name incorrectly. But this is from an ambient album that Nature of Wires put out called Building Reflections. And it's a really good ambient album if you're into that kind of thing. But this first track has these operatic vocals, and they are just stunning and powerful. And the way that they interplay with the dark synth morass underneath, it just gives me this feeling that it's like she's caught in the gravity well of the song, and sometimes she's just going and she's reaching for the stars and she's going to escape, and then she gets sucked back down, and there's just kind of this push-pull throughout the song, and the vocals are just fantastic. So I know this is not the kind of thing that I usually recommend on this list, but highly recommend checking it out. Maybe check it in a playlist and have it be like a palate cleanser that comes up on shuffle now and then or something like that, but definitely listen to it. Next up is a song that I love, but it also kind of drives me crazy, and it's The World by Thought Beings. I love the sound of this track. The main pluck synth riff is just fantastic. The whole track reminds me a lot of, again, like early 90s pop now, with the like Violator era Depeche Mode maybe. I love those piano accents, the percussion fills in between, the very 90s sampled snare drum. All good stuff. The vocals are great. I like the call and response between the two vocals in the verse. So the chorus is super catchy, but that's a blessing and a curse because there's this phrasing thing that they do in the chorus that just tweaks my brain every time I hear it. It's like, look where we are now, high above the ground, and none of those words in the second phrase are on the beat. And I get it. You can't be like, look where we are now, high above the ground. You don't want to land hard on the like that. But I don't know, the way they did it, it's like, gives me like melodic vertigo. And then the song, I feel like it's like a minute and a half a song, but it's kind of put in a 3-minute shell. There's a bridge in there that when it comes along, I'm like ready for the next level, but then it doesn't really go anywhere, unfortunately. So obviously I'm getting a little nitpicky here, but it's just because I love the song so much, and it's so close to being like absolute pop perfection. But as it is, it's just like really, really, really good, and it was one of my top played songs of March. All right, next up is Jessie Frye. She put out a 2-song EP in March called Night of the Dark Prince. Both songs on it are really good, but I'm going to focus on the second one called Fortress. So I was a big fan of the Jessie Frye album that came out a couple years ago, and I would have been perfectly happy if she just brought more of that. But she did not. She went to like a whole other level. So this song, Fortress, is 4 minutes long, but there's so much packed into that. It's like a little mini pop opera. There's all kinds of interesting sections. There's all kinds of ear candy throughout the track. The chorus has 2 parts. The first is like a breakdown chorus with this massive synth riff, but then the second part is so satisfying when it lands. It reminds me a lot of Madonna's Like a Prayer when the chorus kicks in that song, and it's just like, whoa, this is the same kind of thing. It's got like slap bass and guitar, and then just when you think you know where the song is going, it goes off in some other direction and has a new section, and it ratchets up the emotional intensity. It's just such an ambitious track, and it's really fun to listen to, so definitely check it out. Next up is the song Hazel Eyes by Stereoskop. This is more of an early 80s like new wave inspired song. The defining feature is that driving bass line. I mean, right at the beginning of the song, it just grabs you and off you go. And make sure you stick around for the chorus. It's another great chorus entrance. There's the vocal hook is fantastic, and there's these big chorusy, reverbed, clean guitars that happen. And the video is pretty fun too, so maybe check that out. Next up is the album by Jnny Cobra called "The Luciferi, y'all." If I had to pick one track, I'd probably start with We Hustle, which features Dimi Kaye. But this album just takes me back to the anything goes sample-based electro of like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like think DJ Shadow, I hear a lot of that on there. Maybe like Chemical Brothers, stuff like that. But then mix in a healthy dose of like absolutely demonic dark synth and you get this album. But this album is just unabashedly fun and has a sense of humor. I mean, look at that title, right? So this album doesn't have vocals in the traditional sense. It makes extensive use of samples, and it melodicizes them to make melodies, or it chops them up in interesting rhythmic ways. Now that said, there's a couple songs where the samples veer more into talking sample territory, which is an immersion breaker for me. But what's great is that Jnny has included all of the instrumental versions of the tracks in here. And so for just those couple songs, I'm content to listen to the instrumental tracks, which still kick ass. So thank you, Jnny. I love that we have that option. It's very cool. But yeah, this album is just super fun. Definitely check it out, and you'll have a good time. Next up is the eponymous album by Render Ghosts. This one was an instant favorite for me. This is one of those albums that like I pass people when I'm listening to it on headphones, and I just want to shake them and be like, why aren't you listening to this? It's so good. But yeah, it's synth pop, maybe synth art pop. If you look at the history of the group, there's 3 people in the band. None of them have made this kind of music before. And I think that shows, and I think it's a plus. Like, this is definitely people bringing unique perspective and voice to the genre. The key feature of the album are the melodies. They are interesting and surprising and very pretty in places. And the vocalist Van Esch is really able to sell them. And what's more is I feel like everything on this album is crafted to service the melodies. It really feels like they figured out where the melodies want to go and what they want to do, and they laid them out, and then they constructed the songs to best support them. The chord progressions have a lot of modal changes, borrowed chords, that kind of thing. And they're not afraid to play with time either. You know, they'll mix time signatures up, they'll shorten phrases to odd numbers of bars. So I realized just now that, you know, as I'm looking under the hood, examining all this awesome craftsmanship, that it might sound like this is an album of like math rock, like you are meant to engage, not emotionally. That's not true. The songs have an emotional core and they work just great as just listening to the songs too. It's just there's a lot of cool stuff going on underneath. And like I said, everything works because of the fantastic melodies. All right, next up are a bunch of songs by Shannon Curtis. She has been releasing a song every few weeks over the past couple months, kind of building up her 2022 album. She brings her signatures to these songs, which I would say are killer vocal arrangements always, her unabashed earnestness, and her belief in just the power of the big melody, you know, and I'm fully subscribed to that newsletter, so I'm definitely on board. One of my favorite tracks is Sandstorm. It's got that early 90s percussion. There's this really nice vocal lift that happens in and out of the choruses, like, ah. Totally not singing that right, but it's glorious when it happens in the song. The other song that I like in particular is From the Inside Out. It's a little more upbeat. It's got like art bass, catchy chorus. Curtis sings in a low register to harmonize with herself, which is a cool sound to hear. And coming out of the bridge, the song has one of those classic build up, stop, slam moments, which are always super fun. All right, and to finish things off today, I have a couple mainstream suggestions. One of them is Muna, Anything But Me. Muna is one of my favorite bands. Naomi McPherson, the Ableton guru in the band, is fantastic, and the songs always have this clarity and punch. Their lyrics are always great. Their brand of, you know, synth pop rock is just right up my alley. This song isn't reinventing any wheels. It just does the Muna stuff, and so it's great. The fact that it's like a kiss-off breakup song enables some really acerbic lyrics. And finally, the song It Gets Dark by Sigrid. I've bounced off some of Sigrid's singles that have come out between her two albums, but this one just gets me. It starts off with like a lush Bond theme kind of vibe and this really cool ascending melody, but then the chorus kicks in and the bass line is just like phenomenal. And Sigrid is bouncing around on this big interval chorus hook, and she's got some edge in her voice. Yeah, it's just a killer track, and it's a really good like indie pop retrowave crossover. All right, everybody, thanks so much for watching. I hope that you discover some of these songs and enjoy them as much as I have. To facilitate that, there's a couple of playlists down below, one for Bandcamp, one for Spotify. If I'm responsible for even one song being bought on Bandcamp, I will be a very happy camper. Shameless plug time. I am a musician myself. I also have a bunch of fantastic vocal retrowave songs in the works, kind of like the stuff on this list. So follow me on Bandcamp so you know when that's coming out. Thanks. Have a good one.